And if you could take me one slide further. So what I'm going to explain to you is the range of pictures from Nazi deportations is really quite wide, but generally speaking, one has to say most of the photographs taken of the deportations of Jews, of Sinti and Roma, of so-called handicapped, were taken by officials for official documentation. And to the left is a slide, is a page from an album, The Official Chronic of the City of Bielefeld, taken for the city of Bielefeld to develop like how they fought the war, so to speak. And to the right, the black and white, is an album by the police in Würzburg, trying to document how well they organized the deportations. Next slide, please. And this is a photograph taken in a series of 16, and it is an official photographer. So and I just reading sounds perfect now. Thank you. The photographer is with the whole deportation, so he is part of the deportation officials. Camera technique or his skills of taking photographs isn't that developed, so he gets a very blurry photograph. Next slide, please. The opposite, so to speak. This is a frame, a color frame taken by the criminal police, and they take color photos of the deportations of the Sinti in near Stuttgart on the 23rd of May 1940. And so they really got this, what was then very expensive technology, and they take photographs, of course, in order to racially, in a racist way, rather kind of define and portray whom they would refer to as gypsies. And these photographs I've chosen to present to you because it really is, it's only on second looks that you discover, hey, these people are not just marching, having fun, that there is policemen around. That's of a German policeman. So that is really a deportation. Next slide, please. And this is another photograph which I find quite amazing. So this is a photograph taken at night. It's deportations from Munich, and the photographer, clearly working for or with the police, actually prepared the photograph. So he got lighting there and was able to shoot this shot at night in the snowy drizzly dark night. The other thing yeah. And
Okay, I'm sorry. I think what we should do, we should all leave the connection and then go back in. I think, and hopefully that will help us to solve the problem. Is that okay with you, Christoph? Is that I do not hear you talk. So
I just quickly changed the server.
okay.
And is it stronger now?
It's stronger now, but we're missing part of. Okay, so let's try again. It always, yeah. Okay, let's just try it again and see.
If not, we just, yeah.
I'll
Then
go out.
give it a last chance.
Yes, okay. Let's see. Okay.
Yeah. Could you do, yeah. This slide I brought with me because it does show that most of the photographs are taken by German police. Even though in Ludwigshafen it's an unknown photographer, you can clearly see that the person who took the photograph wanted to highlight the fact that this ordinary German policeman was in full command. And Gustav Kühner in Lorach, the same very day, it's the deportation of the Jews to southern France on that 22nd of October 1940, does the very same. Gustav Kühner was in the police, we know that, and it's nearly the exact pose, like this raised finger showing the policeman in full control. So most of the photographs were taken by policemen. Next slide, please. And this is a photograph I will return to later if the connection holds. And this photograph, if you don't have the whole series, meaning like the context, the real context of the photographs, the 20 photographs surrounding it, you kind of would not know that this is a deportation. But it is, and I'll be talking about that in a bit, just to remind us that what we expect, like the image we have got in our head of deportations, is not in a way always represented in the material, in the sources we find, in the visual sources we find. Next slide, please. And that is, of course, that's a photograph I have taken of a broken camera, because that is what we are missing. What we have found so far is maybe 3 photographs not taken by German officials, not taken by German onlookers. I'm conscientiously not using the word bystander here, because the photographs taken by Jews are missing. So what we get is a perspective shaped by the perpetrators or the onlookers, and we don't have the gaze back, the view back onto the perpetrators, onto the onlookers by the people who were victimized by the deportations. Next slide, please. The research project of which I'm part of, its goal is a digital publication of all pictures of Nazi deportations from Germany in the borders, pre-war borders between 1938 and 45. So it's not Austria, but just core Germany, so to speak. We are searching for unknown pictures, and that is one of the reasons, of course, I'm talking to you. We try to index and contextualize them and do in-depth research. And what is very important to us to find an ethical approach and a creative way to deal with these photographs. And of course, the picture I put in here into that slide is just a reminder that at times our wits are at an end, because this is a photograph from the database of Yad Vashem, and it says it's a deportation. I would agree, but we don't have any more information on that. So the only thing we know, it's a small gauge train. We don't know the station. We don't know who's standing there. And then, yeah, that is kind of where it ends. We would think, okay, it's a deportation, but where to put it into our digital atlas and digital catalog. Next slide, please. How do we work? We have researched most of the literature, and you know that in Germany there's lots and lots of local studies on Bremen, Bremerhaven, Totenhausen in National Socialism, all these places, and often they come up with photographs, and sometimes they come up with photographs they had for a fleeting moment in the 70s, so they come up with bad reproductions. So we have to go to do research in person with persons. We just mail to 1750 German archives and do public search. We have got a lorry, like a 1950s lorry, going through towns in Germany, especially smaller towns. And we do hope to find more photographs. I'll answer the question in the Q&A later. Next slide, please. So that's the places we've got so far. It's 60 places. And it is interesting that if you look at them, it's mainly smaller places. Klaus Hesse, a German historian, once quipped that the deportations seemingly were a small town sensation, and I think he's right. And of course, you've got huge gaps. And the hugest gap is the place I'm living in. That's Berlin. Like Berlin had more than 160,000 Jewish inhabitants alone, and more than 180 deportations from Berlin. And there's no photograph, none whatsoever. So there's huge gaps, but we have got we've got a wide range, especially from smaller cities and smaller towns. And Eisenach actually is a smaller town. Next slide, please. What we have got is a series of photographs taken for the official chronic, the photo archive, 1935 Tull. It was never really finished, and in on number 34, you find and I'm quoting the German now, the Exmittierung der Juden aus Eisenach. So the exmittance, the throwing out the Jews out of Eisenach. So that was a series of photographs taken by the city of Eisenach, who wanted to document that as an important event in its history. Next slide, please. And photographs were taken by Theodor Harder. We think we're still researching on that. Theodor Harder was working often for the city of Eisenach and had a Photoshop. And what you see is the backside of this one of the photographs. You can see it's postcard paper, so that hints to the fact that it was actually and he had a Photoshop and was selling photographs. And it's rather strange oblong format the photographs are in. Now let's look at the front of the photographs. Next slide, please. So that's the photograph he took in front of the gathering site. It's a photograph that shows the Jews at roughly, we measured the shadows, it's roughly 9 o'clock in the morning. We know from other sources they probably, all the Jews from Eisenach, we're talking about 59 people, of whom one ended her life just on that very day in order not to deport it, but it's 48 people there. And they had to wait from 6 o'clock onwards. At 9, a photographer appears and takes these photographs in the Goethestraße. And then he runs off. Next slide. And I doubled this one just by, this one. It's Schillerstraße now. And you can see that the photographer rushed off a bit and waits for the deportation, for the deported to arrive. You can see if you look into onto the left, you can see a little girl with a pram pushing in. You can see on the right, you can see a postman marching by on this, what appears to have been a very sunny and bright May morning in 1942. And next slide, please. And you can just see that the photographer is standing there, and you can kind of get how slowly this group of heavily packed and heavily suited, they're all wearing winter coats because they expect to see the next winter, which they won't be. But you can see how slowly they march, because you can see that girl with the pram. She's a lot quicker. She's already on the left there. So, in the gap between the groups, they seemingly organized it in groups. You can see a bunch of kids going to kindergarten or school, like those 4 girls in the middle on the street corner. And next to the electric post, you can see like the white coloring is phosphor, and that's part of the efforts to protect German cities against air raid. So everything had to be dark, and so they painted all the poles in this white phosphor color. But behind that white phosphor color, you can see a black man, and that seems to be the policeman. We come back to him in a minute. Next slide, please. And then the photographer just turns around and takes a photograph of the back of the group, and you can see those carts they are pushing. The people on the bicycles don't belong to the deported, because Jews were not allowed to have bicycles anymore. But actually, you can date the photograph in a way, because what you can see in the middle of the photograph, just to the left of the railway bridge, is a blossoming cherry tree, and in Germany, cherries blossom in early May. Then next slide, please. The photographer kind of rushes on, takes a photograph of the group arriving in a side street quite near the station. So the back of the photographer is already at the stations. And then he photographs the group just resting, and you can see with the shadows, or by the shadows, that they're resting for something like an hour, quite a long time. And then they are asked by this man in black on the third photograph on the top, showing kind of, they are asked to march on. And the very interesting fact is, if you look at those 3 photographs, you can see the windows moving. Like if you, on the first top photographs, you can see the windows are closed, but on the bottom photograph, you can see that the bottom right window has been opened, and the curtain has been drawn. So you can see bystanders. And of course, on these photographs, really at the station, you can see a lot of them. You see that the photographer had the habit of taking 2 in a row, so to speak, snapshots. I'll be talking about the left photograph in a minute for a bit longer. But you can see lots and lots of people around, especially as they're nearing the station. And then next slide, please. This photograph I've shown to you. Actually, in this photograph, you can see that the photographer was not a policeman, because he takes a photograph of this moment where the police is kind of losing control, because the deportees, the to-be deported Jews, are mixing at the main entrance to the station. And it still looks the same. I'll show you in a minute. They're mixing with the not to be deported passers-by. And you can see the little boy running there. He's probably running to school Saturday. The 9th of May was a Saturday, and Saturdays in Germany then were school days. And you can see how heavily packed the to be deported were. And they're mixing, being watched. People come out of the station, of the main entrance, go in, together with them. Next slide, please. And then the photographer rushes off and goes onto, onto the top of the stairs in order to kind of take a photograph of the people arriving. And the girl with the huge dark braids, Eva Spangenthal, is always walking at the front. You can see she's got a milk can, so she probably is taking water with her, and her father is to the very left. And then he runs around onto the other side and takes a photograph of the people getting up the stairs. It must have been very heavy with all those heavy coats they're wearing in this rather warm, sunny day. And of course, the photographer makes an effort. He tries to get Eisenach in. So you can see the sign of the city in that station quite clearly, and the photographer made the effort to show that. The next slide, please. And then he kind of takes different angles, and I'm quite unsure, me and my team are quite unsure which order. It gets quite complicated here, and the original order has been lost. But yeah, he takes photographs of the people pushing into the third class carriages. Next slide, please. Yeah, and that's the last photo then to the right is the end of the train. So we think and supposed that they got onto the last 2 or 3 carriages of that train. And we know from other sources that this is the normal routine train take from Eisenach to Weimar. So that's and they had to pay for the tickets beforehand. They were taken to Weimar. It took 1.5 hours. Then was strip searched. The people lost most of their property, whatever they had. Many photographs of them were taken away, we know from source, and then were taken into a freight train, which would take them in 2.5 days to Lublin, to a small ghetto near Lublin called Belgique, where all of them were murdered or died. And that is something you don't see on the photographs. So that's so to speak where the source ends. Usually the photographs just show like the boarding of the train, and then they don't tell you what happens, where the train goes and where the changing happens. So that is something we have to reconstruct and to deal with in an appropriate manner. Next slide, please. This photograph, just like what we're doing is to document like how what it looks like now. And in this house to the left, the color photo I took is, as you can see, the columns. So that it makes you think, okay, this is this house and we know it. I wanted to show you that photograph because again, you can see how, and really to focus on how many people stand there and look. And especially in the middle of the photograph, on top, you see like a dentist looking out. So we identified the dentist. There was a dentist's office in this house. And if you look further down, you see a man with a cigarette in his arm and a newspaper rolled under his arm. And just in front of that, you have got a little boy, and this little boy wears something like a crown on his head. So it's probably his birthday. And we actually tried to look for that boy because, 9th of May 1942, he's 7 years old. So he was born in 35 or maybe 34. He might still be alive, but we made a public search, but unfortunately no one answered that. The other thing is, yes, we identified people. I think that's very important to give back names. And in the middle of the slightly to the left there, you can see Magda Katz. Magda Katz was a nurse, and you can see, you can see her bag actually is carried, which says nurse Magda, and then the forced middle name, I'm not, Sarah Katz, and that's carried by men because the blankets are made the same way and put on to their rucksacks, their knapsacks in the same way. I would think it's her husband. So we can identify those two. And I think it's very interesting and important that Magda Katz actually looks at the photographer, whereas the other lady doesn't. And we haven't identified the other lady yet. But we're still working on that. Next slide is again this one. Just like to highlight the fact, look, if you look at the photograph, hey, this is the main entrance of Eisenach and everyone is looking. It's a normal week, and it's Shabbat but for those onlookers, it's of course a normal weekday and they just look. And you hardly see any policemen. I think that's the interesting bit of the exhibition, or of the photo series, that is not focusing on the guards. Lots of photo series do. This one isn't. It just focuses really like a photo reportage on the deportation of the Jews, and you don't really see in a way who is organizing it, and you have to reconstruct that from other sources. It's the criminal police in this case in Eisenach, and we know the names and we'll try and identify them too, because it's not only the victims that need to be remembered, but it's the perpetrators too. After all, we are in Germany. Next slide, please. Yeah, the ethical challenges. Next slide. It's the main problems we have is that, like someone remarked in the chat, yes, we have got so many photographs and most of them are taken by the perpetrators. So it's very difficult to get away from that perspective, because of course we're looking at the photographs shaped and made by perpetrators. And then of course we have to tag personal information. How far do we want to go? And we certainly don't want to kind of, so to speak, strip naked the victims yet again. How do we identify the bystanders, if we want to call them bystanders? I tend not to, the perpetrators. And of course, if many of them are taken from albums called Evakuierung, Abtransport, all those horrible Nazi terms. And do we have to repeat them in order to relocate the photographs to see them? And of course, one of the problems then we got too is to identify whether the people who were deported as being Jewish actually thought themselves to be Jewish or not. You know, many of them thought themselves to be, at least in 32 or something, to be Germans first of all. And the last thing is, yes, we're trying to look in Poland. I read that chat in that question on the chat, but only in those parts of Poland which were Germany. We thought that is, as a first step, when we're thinking here about, of course, a development, we want to do Europe, but like we thought, okay, this is enough for the time being. I mean, Germany, as it were, is large enough, and we want to kind of find ways to deal with the photographs, to get it really worked out, how to search, how to catalog those photographs, how to do the in-depth research. First of all, trying Germany and then move on to do a next step. But so we do, we try dig into Polish archives, but only into those territories which were German until 1945. So we've got Breslau, i.e. Wrocław in, but say not Katowice. Next slide, please. Yeah, and the only thing I think, if you want to do something like that, you really have to, and that is absolutely necessary, maximum transparency, to say like what we do know, where we doubt ourselves about, we're doubting ourselves about semantic coding, and of course the visual language of the perpetrators. All that has to be really transparent and to be carefully done in talking to you. And of course, I'm really interested in your views on that, and of course talking to the Jewish communities and the Zentralrat of the Sinti and Roma in Germany. Next slide. and I was rushing through a bit to kind of make up for the time, so we already come to the educational tool, and we've done that in working with German pupils, even though in Corona times that wasn't that easy, but we did quite a few workshops online and in real, where we asked the pupils what they thought to be the most interesting series. And their choice was heard. So like Eisenach was really a series like many pupils voted to be one of the most interesting ones. And then the other one is Munich. You saw the black and white photograph taken at night from that series. And the only thing they were not so keen on is Remscheid. That will be the third series. And that is then a deportation of the Romja, or Sinti and Romja from Remscheid in 43. And these series, they have chosen with us, so it's kind of 2/3, 1/3 at least. We discussed how to work with that, and like the Eisenach series I'm currently doing in lots of workshops, trying to work out with the pupils what they can see, what they can decipher and learn from the photographs themselves. Giving an order, for example, is perfectly easy once you have got photographs showing the places today. So we will be doing that. Next slide, please. So doing in-depth research. Next slide, please. What they will do is, and they have done that, like out of the 5 groups I've done in the last 3 weeks, 4 did it really well, and 1, okay, no. That's how learning goes. And they all managed to kind of, get an order to the photographs. And then what will happen is, next slide, please, that once they solved all the clues, they'll be taken, I think you can kind of see that, through a virtual tour of the route the deportees took, and will be able to change perspectives. And that will be not photoreal. You can see the photograph on top of the 3D city the designers of our agency and why did in a very nice way. I think it's important not to pretend this is real, but to say, look, we are moving in a virtual room here, but it's important to understand the virtual room, to look at the onlookers as well as the perpetrators, and of course to understand about the fate of the deported Jews as well. And then move through that and change perspective. And we are just currently debating, been doing that all morning, debating how to represent the photographer in that, because that's what we usually forget. We're looking through the lens of a photographer, and we forget that, hey, that person is a real human being. Last slide. Whew, that was fast. I need to show that slide because it's important to note, hey, it's many people involved in that, apart from the House of the Wandel Conference, and it's financed by the Federal Republic of Germany. Okay, so I think we can stop sharing now, and I might try and turn myself back on and try and answer the questions you've got. And before doing so, I would like to say sorry again. Like Rachel and I really tried out, and when we were chatting, we were really didn't have any problems, but that's how it works at times. So your questions, please.
Thank you so much, Christoph. This was truly, truly fascinating. And I think a few of the questions or concerns you answered already. Carol asked whether you have photos from Poland as well, from Lvov. But you answered that at this point you're focusing on Germany, right? So Carol also asked, what do you think the bystanders were thinking about these people marching with baggage through the streets? Do you like especially look at the expressions, or do you discuss that in these in classrooms and in these settings, the role of the bystanders?
Now, yeah, like there was like some years ago, there was a quite a wonderful workshop colleagues did in Eisenach, and they asked pupils just that question, make a little essays on that, what they might have thought. Um, I find it, and I think that's a creative approach. I find it very difficult to kind of reason what they're thinking, because I know that in parts they know that they're being photographed, and I know that when I know that I'm being photographed, I look particularly stupid in order to try and look smart. Like all that happens, and so like the mere fact that the photograph is taken changes the photograph, especially the onlookers, because they know they are now on part of a stage, part of a staging too, and they behave accordingly, I would think. So I find it very difficult. And we have got very scarce source material. We do know that the police in Eisenach writes in a report about the deportation that there was not a lot ado in the population about that deportation. So there was not a big talk about it. The only thing that happens is that the people now knew, hey, houses are free, and they're massively applying to the criminal police, hey, and to the mayor, can we now move into those flats?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And of course, things would be auctioned, and there again, people participated. But what they really thought when this happened, yeah, I haven't got. I would love to find one letter by someone from Eisenach saying, "Look, like sister, I thought this and that." Haven't found that yet. And just by looking at the faces, like sometimes you look because of the sun. Yeah, it is really difficult. And I've seen a boy smiling in the Warsaw Ghetto when he was dying because he was photographed.
Right. Right. So I think it's very important to be as careful as you are with these interpretations, and to be factual. Peggy is asking, how did you identify that girl by name and her father, that in Eisenach, the one,
Yeah, that was done by the local Stumbling Stone Initiative and the City Archive, and they did a book on stumbling stones and put in photographs, and that really fit. And in this town archive is actually a photograph of her first school day, and it matches. But at times, again, like the faces on these photographs, they're not even a nail, and to ascertain whether that. So sorry to say that nail size little shape is someone like that. If the photographs are, it's difficult. I'm currently struggling with one of the photographs where you see a very old man, and I think it might be the rabbi, but the only photograph we have got of him is mid-20s. And this years later, with all the persecution, I think it's probably him, but he looks a lot more haggard. Understandable, but it's not a chuck match,
Yeah. So Marcy is asking whether you can please explain why there are no pictures from Berlin, from the deportations.
I mean, yeah, there's two answers. First is, hey, of course there were photographs. I mean, there were photographs. We haven't found them yet, and that is, like I would think. I mean, there's more than 180 deportations going. So like, I can't imagine like in a city like Berlin where like 1 in 10 have got a camera and this is not being photographed. But as I said, and that's why I had this long intro, the photographs might not look the way we expect them to look. So I did a public call for photos like 2 years ago. No, it's 2020, in kind of preparing this project, and I was stupid because I said, look, they probably look like that, and I should have said, we just be any marching group, and might strange angle, because of course it might be taken from like a window ledge or something, or from a balcony, and you mainly see plants and only in the back a group of people, so we have to ask again and do another call and perhaps explain more carefully that a photograph of deportation is not the photograph you expect it to be. And our view, of course, is shaped on the view we have got of the arrival of trains in Auschwitz-Birkenau.
Mm-hmm.
So it ought to look like that, but in Germany, it's not. And then the other answer is, and of course, the regime was very careful that nothing happened in Berlin, because they were afraid that the press would get it. And there was still international press in Berlin in 42, 43, 44, Swedish papers say. So they were careful in that. Like, and in a little village, like I'm from a little village, you can say, look, you take photographs because you can, because like the policeman, and it's all right, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
because it's nodding. Yeah, you do that kind of. And in Berlin it was kind of more guarded, but still I would think there were photographs, and they might have been taken. I'm reading the chat too. They might have been found by an Allied soldier and taken to America, of course, like the Höcker album was
Mm-hmm.
took the same way. But we don't know. Like the deportation photos from Würzburg were found by an American soldier,
Mm-hmm.
Isaac Wahler, but he handed them into the Nuremberg trials. That's where we got them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that's also important to realize that you're not, how are you going about to find these photos? Meaning you go into the archives and search the photographs that the archives have. What archives do you go into? Like how do you work, or do you go into the cities and ask people to get their photo albums out, or how does that work?
We do both. I mean, we go like to the of course, first thing is use HMM and Yad Vashem and kind of go through their photo collections, and then we wrote to all the town's archives, and it's we haven't got lots of new photographs, but we got lots of new information,
Mm-hmm.
because they found, and that's really surprised me, that lots of archivists write to us saying, hey, we only got that, but we know that about that, because the Stumbling Stone Initiative or whatever, local researcher has written on that and sent that article with the photographs. That helps us a lot. So
Yeah.
to get a layer of depth in there and understanding, especially identification of victims.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then we do go, if you think like there might be more, we go in there, and we've got this lorry with a little exhibition, and that is going through smaller places, and we think it might be good if you open up there like, this little exhibition, and then a week later we do a bring your photo event. I did one in Potsdam. Okay, you can't call it a little town, but suburb of Berlin. And okay, it didn't quite work, or we didn't get new photographs, but we had lots of talks about that, and that's of course important too, because it's part of the outreach.
Mm-hmm.
And the discussions. If you think about memorial culture, it's the discourse.
Mm-hmm.
It's us talking about it.
Yeah.
So that's important too, and that's part of the project, as
Yeah.
at least how we see it.
Yeah. And I actually love that you going into the small towns and prepare small exhibitions and really tell the small town story, and reach out to the people living there and try to find more information, because that I would think is still possible, right? For
Yeah.
people to know family history, or that they have heard stories, or so that's amazing. And actually somebody asked whether you prepare some classroom material, because this is really I'm
Not
totally
yet, but we are
fascinated.
working. And like for all the panelists, I quickly type in my I work for the House of the Wannsee Conference, and we'll be preparing something, but not like, because we're doing it with the pupils, it takes a bit longer, but I think it's important to do it with the pupils to really understand what they are interested in. And anyway, it's fun. Like it's to see what they see is really fun. And so we will have prepared something by end of autumn, and this virtual tour, this learning tour, will be online as of December. Next this year. So it's so whoever wants to kind of contact me, pray do so, and I'll and the Eisenach photos, strictly speaking, offline. Of course, you cannot use them, but I mean, there might be a stupid historian from Germany who sent you those photographs later if you sent him, i.e. me, a nice mail. Any photographs from Hamburg? No, same as in Berlin. And Frankfurt, neither. So out of the largest German communities, the 5 largest, you only have got Breslau with photographs in it. It's 5 photographs out of the 500 we got.
Yeah, that's amazing. And actually, what I saw, though, what the Arrows and Archives have, for example, from Berlin, and I would think of other larger cities too, they do have the deportation lists, right? And I saw they put them online now. So if somebody knew that family members or anybody they are researching was deported from Berlin, there is a possibility going through these deportation lists right now, very easy.
And it might be very important for the project too, because then we might think of another way to represent Berlin in that project. I mean, like we of course you can do it with leaving this blank space and just say Berlin missing, Hamburg missing, and I think it's important to highlight the gaps.
Right.
Right. And that would be highlighted, but maybe we'll find a different way.
Right. I mean, one of the questions that I have is, like, the larger cities are also the places where Jews survived in hiding, right? Like where it was more possible to survive in hiding than in smaller places. So could that have could that somehow be connected, that people just didn't document as much because they felt, there was some hidden business going on, or is that completely?
I don't know. I mean, we've got a few photographs, like in the Jewish Museum of Berlin. Annemarie Kuttner took, just before she went into hiding, of her mother sitting there in their flat, waiting for the deportation, so to speak. Those last photographs. I think that, if the people hiding actually survived the hiding and managed to hide her camera with her or him, then there might be chances, but that's scarce. Even those, like the success chances of hiding in Berlin weren't that high.
Right. And I don't remember quite whether you put a number to it, but you have told me in previous conversations that there were about 3 million cameras in the early 40s in Germany, right? So there must be more. A lot burned in Germany, was destroyed as well, but there should be, I think there's a good chance that more photographs will come out.
If you would find any photograph of Berlin, of course, I'll do a naked dance in the street and rejoice. No, I would be, that would be really like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe this talk helps us in finding them.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And that was one of the reasons why, first of all, I think this is a really, really important and fascinating project. But I also, in my communications this week, I have again and again pointed out, please, if you have a surviving family from Europe, if you have photographs, please, use the summer to look through them, and maybe we'll have some discoveries that would make me very happy, and I would love that to happen. So please, everyone, share this talk, share this initiative, and I will also, in a follow-up email, send you Christoph's email, so you can reach out directly to him, and also more information about the project. And yeah, thank you so much, Christoph, for giving the talk. And I
putting up with the technical problems.
Yeah, well,
I think, but I mean, Germany would say now, jetzt brauchen wir ein Bierchen, but it's too early for you, but I think it's time for me.